right, I think we can get started.
Yep, go ahead.
We just about a minute past. So again, thank you everybody for joining our live virtual demo today on the OsmoTECH XT and the OsmoTECH Pro microosmometers. My name is Shweta Nair, and I'm the Senior Product Manager here at Advanced Instruments, supporting the OsmoTECH portfolio of osmometers. And joining me, who will be doing the demonstration for you on the two instruments, is our application specialist, Rick Zampa. All right, with that, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. As you've already seen, we'd love to get your questions and address any concerns you're having throughout the session. So please feel free to enter them in the chat function. Now, as I was saying, please use the chat function for any questions you may have during the session. We will pause at certain intervals throughout the session to answer them. If not, we will definitely take the time at the end to address them after Rick is done with the demos. And if we don't have enough time today, we will address them as well post if we have your information. Now let's get started. To kick off, I want to give you a brief introduction about Advanced Instruments as a whole. We are a company that supports customers globally with over installations in over 90 countries throughout North America, EMEA, and APAC regions. We are the leaders in osmolality testing, so we support our customers across the clinical, food, beverage, and especially the bioprocessing workflows. And we're headquartered in Norwood, Massachusetts, with offices in different locations globally, supporting customer needs with osmolality and cell line development, as well as liquid handling quality assurance. So today we'll be talking about the OsmoTECH portfolio, which is the only osmometer portfolio that's specifically designed for customers in the biopharma market, and they're optimized for testing of biological samples such as cell culture media, buffers, and aqueous drug products. We also offer the Solentum instruments and reagents for cell line development workflows, the Anoximat anaerobic jar system for bacterial cultivation, and the Artel instruments for pipette and automated liquid handling calibration. All four of these product portfolios are supported by our own field service engineers who are trained and have a service contract option available to help you maintain the equipment and prevent any disruption to your workflow. Specifically for our OsmoTECH users in biopharma, we offer qualification and validation services to ensure regulatory compliance and help you get your instrument up and running quicker. Now, focusing in on our OsmoTECH osmometers, let's just take a few minutes to discuss some of the applications of osmolality testing in biological development and manufacturing processes. Starting with cell line development and through cell culture scale-up, osmolality can be used to confirm the concentration of your media, feed, and can really help you gain insight into optimizing the scale-up steps. In downstream purification workflows, osmolality is used to confirm your buffer concentrations, help ensure your buffer exchange, and measure the concentration of that drug substance. And finally, in formulation all the way from development through fill finish, osmolality is a critical quality attribute that provides valuable information from the identity, safety, purity, and stability of your drug products. For injectable drug products, the osmolality solution must be in the physiological range, or it must be close to the osmolality of your blood, since a higher or lower osmolality can cause a pain at the injection site by creating a hypertonic or hypotonic environment. So you can see various different use cases for osmolality across both the QC and in-process testing workflows. Now, when it comes to selection of a new osmometer for your lab, there are definitely some questions that you're looking to get answered, and there are some of the features you may want to consider, and these are not in any particular order. Is the testing process simple? Is the instrument accurate and reliable? How much volume does it take to run a sample on these instruments? And how long does a sample take to test and give you a result? How do we record the data when this instrument gives you the results? And are these instruments fit to work in my workflow that may be having GMP requirements or other regulatory requirements? So these are definitely some of the considerations that may be on your mind, and you want to consider bringing in a new instrument, especially an osmometer, into your lab. So having said that, the OsmoTECH osmometers are built to address those questions and concerns and meet them with flying colors. So the OsmoTECH is built specifically for the biopharmaceutical lab and keeping the customer's needs in this workflow. So the testing process can be fast and simple to integrate into any of your workflows and throughput needs. They have flexible data connectivity options and strong data integrity features. These features are adjustable to your lab-specific needs and are flexible for R&D, process development, and manufacturing settings. And now with the OsmoTECH XT, which is our instrument there on the left that Rick will also be demoing for you, you can test samples up to 4,000 milliosmoles and improve testing performance on even hard-to-freeze, challenging viscous samples. All the OsmoTECH portfolio microosmometers currently support the different regional pharmacopoeias, such as your European, US, and Japanese pharmacopoeias, and also support 21 CFR Part 11 compliance and EU Annex 11 compliance. So with that, let's take a closer look at the OsmoTECH XT single sample osmometer that Rick would demo for you today. So this particular instrument, when you compare starting with the XT, you're really looking at an operating range of 0 to 400. Test times on the low and high ranges vary from 150 to 190 seconds. It's a one-step direct testing method, and it's 20 microliter sample volume. And then you have the OsmoTECH Pro, which is the multi-sample microosmometer with the operating range of 0 to 2000. A test operating range of 0 to 2000 milliosmol per kilogram, a test time of 90 seconds, a sample cup for sample introduction, and a volume of 30 microliters. And as I mentioned, both of these instruments support pharmacopoeia guidelines for osmolality testing in your workflow. So having said that, if you have any questions so far, please feel free to put them in the chat function throughout this session. And I'm going to now hand over to Rick.
First, Shweta, there seems to be one question before we move on. Is there any correlation with sample loading amount to osmolality value? Would you like to take that, or you want me to take that?
You can take that if you like.
Yes, no, there is no correlation between the sample volume and the osmolality value. Either it doesn't matter the volume, the value of this osmolality should not change with the volume of used in the testing. So with that, we will go from there. I am going to, oh, looks like there's another question here.
I'm going to stop sharing mine.
Yep,
and let me get to the chat. Any info about the automated HT? That was new to me. Yes, so the automated HT is a plate-based osmometer where you can introduce sample in a 96 well plate, and the instrument would automate and test the samples directly from that format. We have more information about that, which we will be able to reach out to you separately, as well as welcome you to a virtual demo we will have for that device very soon as well in the coming weeks. Rick, over to you.
Okay, you should be able to see the instruments now, I hope.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I will move around to the instrumentation and we will get started. As Shweta said here, we have the OsmoTECH XT on this side here, and we have the OsmoTECH Pro over here. We're going to start out on the OsmoTECH XT. So I'm going to switch cameras here, and it should zoom in on the OsmoTECH XT. It looks like we have. So first, a basic overview of the instrumentation. We have our display here, our touchscreen display. You can see up at the top, there's a little like person. It says ready. It says instrument name. You can see it's nice. It's green, so it shows it's ready to go, easy to see from any kind of distance. We have our result in the middle. We have our range selection here. As Shweta said, it's a 0 to 4,000 milliosmol range of the instrument. It's broken down into two separate ranges, 0 to 1,500 milliosmoles and 1,500 to 4,000. The switch between the ranges, you just hit the button, and it switches back and over. There's no need to calibrate between switching ranges. It's already calibrated and ready to go. Sample ID button here. This is for adding a sample ID to the system. Our menu button, our test counter on this side. It helps you with your inventory control to make sure you know when you're getting low on sample tips and cleaners. Have a couple of buttons down here at the bottom, one for land connection, question, which gives you information about the instrument, and then you have an information button, which gives you further instrument information about the instrument. The top here, you see we have our test kit. In the test kit is 100 sample tips. Here, I'll show you how those work in a minute. And one of our test cleaners, 100 test cleaners, that sits here in the top. Over here on the side, we have our sampler, which is used for the tests, and then our carriage and our cooling assembly entry here. Has a built-in barcode scanner on the front. And let me see if that's everything I need to talk about right now. Yes, I think it is. So as I said, right now I have the instrument set up in probably its most basic format. I am not requiring user ID login or sample ID at this time. I'm going to show you how all of that works when I go into the menus. And then when we move over to the OsmoTECH Pro, I'll show you how that's set up. I have it set up that requires sample IDs and user IDs. So that one, I'll show you how, when I run a test over there, how that works. Right here, I'm just going to show you how easy it is to run a test right now and how quickly we can run a test. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about osmolality. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see a little bit better as I run a test. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to run a test. I'm going to take some of our 290 reference solution here. So I have our 290 reference solution. I'm going to get a tip from the top box there. I'm going to put it onto the sampler. You slide that down, snap it into place. Sometimes you hear it snap, but just assure that it's seated at the metal part there. To run a test, I'm going to take my ampule. I'm going to take my sampler. I'm going to give it a couple aspirations, just like you would do with a pipette, to assure you're getting a good sample. 20 microliter sample size, as we said. Most important thing to remember now is you want to wipe off the outside of the sample tip. So you want to take a Kim wipe, make sure you remove any excess sample from around the tip. You also want to make sure there's no drop on the top of the tip there. So the way I like to do is I just take the Kim wipe, no pressure at all, just drag it across the top. It removes that little drop, and now we're ready to run our test. To run our test, I take the entire sampler. I take our cleaner out, insert the sampler into the cradle. Then I just push that up in, and it will start the test. You can see now we went to yellow, meaning we're testing here. Our status bar is here, which shows our status as we're going along in the test. It will hear the knocking sound. All of our instruments are freezing point depression, and that's what I probably should have said that a little bit earlier. It's freezing point depression. So what we're doing now is, if you can see this little kind of curve down here, is we started at room temperature, and we're driving the temperature of the sample down through its 0 degrees C and its freezing point. See if I can zoom in a little closer. Nope, that's too close. And we're driving it down through 0 degrees C and through its freezing point. When we get to a set temperature at the bottom of that curve, the sample is still liquid, because we've driven it down through that temperature very, very quickly, and we're assuring that it stays liquid until we want it to freeze. When it gets down to this set temperature at the bottom of this curve here, which should be in our status bar somewhere between 65 and 75% along the status bar here, we'll hear a knocking sound. That knocking sound is the initiation of crystallization to freeze the sample. We do this at a set temperature because we've set it up that way, so we know exactly when we're initiating that sample. That liquid sample then crystallizes. Oh, there it goes. Went a little quicker than I expected it there. Now we've released the heat of the last bit of energy, and now we're going up to the plateau, and now we measure that plateau or that temperature, and we wait for that to stabilize. Once that stabilizes, we then convert that temperature into osmolality, and it'll display our osmolality on the screen here, and we're just about ready to finish up. We're at 93% right now. And we'll get our test results. So we got a 291. I was trying to get 290, perfectly within range. We're looking for plus or minus 2 on that instrument. So we're well within our range there on this test result. Now you'll see here, you see it flashing red. says remove sampler and clean chamber. So what I want to do now is I want to slide the sampler out. So I've removed the sampler here. I'm going to grab one of our cleaners. I'm going to insert it into the instrument. I want to make sure it goes all the way to the end to comes to a full stop. And I want to twist it each way a couple of times. I want to remove it, flip it over, insert it again, and do the same thing. And then I want to leave that cleaner in there. It's important to leave that cleaner in there because what it does is it reminds the next person who comes up to the instrument, or I should say, it shows them that it's been cleaned. It also reminds them that they should clean the instrument after they're done. So it's very important to clean the instrument after every test. That's basically the only maintenance there is for the instrument. So very easy to use. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to remove the sample tip from the sampler. So there's two ways to do this. You can take and you can push down on the plunger and you hear that snap out of place. Or I find it easier to do it a different way. I just take my thumb, I give it a little push at the top, I slide it off, and you just wipe off the Teflon tip, put it back in the cradle, and you're ready to run your next test. So that's how to run the OsmoTECH XT. The OsmoTECH XT has what we call our intelligent cooling system. It's designed to test all types of samples in the bioprocessing industry now, from something as straightforward as our reference solutions to viscous solutions to solutions with volatiles like PEG in them, high proteins, high sugars. So it's designed to manage all these different types of samples to assure that you get accurate, reliable results, regardless of the type of sample you're testing. So viscous samples, high proteins, high sugars, PEG in there, cryopreservatives, anything can be run on this instrument. Now, what I'd like to do here is go into the menus and show you a little bit about how the instrument's set up for you if you're in a GMP environment, or if you're looking at your data management or integrity, and how easy it is to set it up to do any of these things, from having none of it turned on if you're in research and you really don't need the GMP type of regulations, all the way down to full GMP compliance. So, waited too long there. So I'm going to go into the settings menu, and you can see the settings menu here. You have a bunch of different colored keys on there. Those keys represent the types of people who have access to those menus. So one that has two keys like this means operators, supervisors, and administrators can get into it. A gold key means just supervisors and administrators. The administrator obviously has access to everything. And the red key means just the administrator can get in there. So the first thing I want to show you is how to set up users in the instrument. Like I said, this particular instrument, I didn't have user IDs required. But if you wanted to have users set up so you could have them log in when they're testing, it's very, very simple to do. You can either come in here and hit the add button. You set them up with a user ID, a password, and their level of access. Or you can use LDAP or Active Directory. So you can use your Windows-based logins to log into the instrument as well as to your desktop computer. Your IT people would come in, set this up, set up the security groups, and it'd be ready to run there. So that's adding users. Next thing I like to talk about is the restrictions menu, which again, like I said, I didn't have user ID and sample ID set up to be required. And that's where that setting is stored here. You'll notice also that I have to log in to every menu I go into. This is part of the audit trail and part of your data integrity to assure that the instrument, that anything that happens to the instrument or is changed on the instrument is logged in the audit trail, and they know exactly who went in and did it. So here's your user access menu. You can see here we have supervisor and operator, and you can see the different things that they have access to. And I could change any of those if I wanted to and update them. I'm not going to do anything right now, but you can see how many different options you have here. So you could have somebody have access to everything, nothing, however you want to set it up for your particular laboratory. Passwords. Now, if you're using the LDAP, obviously your password would be your Windows password or your desktop computer password. But if you wanted to set up the passwords here on the instrument, you can see you can have them expire at certain time frames, 30, 60, 90, or never. You can have You can set up the strength of the password over here, how many characters, special characters, uppercase, lowercase, that type of thing. So you can do that all here if you wanted to, if you weren't using LDAP or your Active Directory. And there's the testing menu. And this is where you set up to require user IDs and sample IDs for testing. So you can see here first, it says enable administrators access to perform testing. That's checked for us because we're using it as a demo unit. We want to log in as the administrator to be able to show you everything as well as run the tests. Most of the time that would be unchecked. The administrator wouldn't have access to running tests, would only have access to setting the instrument up. You can see here we can select user ID and sample ID, and I'll turn those on this time. I'll hit save. Then it asks me why I'm making that change. And in this particular case, I'm going to put demo in there. And that is part, again, of the audit trail and your data integrity, showing why a change was made to an instrument, who made the change, when, and how. You also can require logins to change the range. We're not going to switch that now. When we go back, you'll see the difference in the display when we go back when we turn those on. Oops, hit that too soon. Now I'm going to have to log back in. Sorry about that. So then there's the auditing function is the last thing I wanted to show you on here. So as we talked about data integrity and management, this is where you'd set it up for your 21 CFR Part 11 compliance or your Annex 11. If you're looking at the EU, this is where you have your review and approval of results. So your electronic signature, this is where you'd set that up if you wanted to use that. So as you can see, we have review results and approve results, and then who can do those types of things. If we had this turned on, I'm not going to turn it on right now. You would have to then review or approve the results then before they got sent from the instrument if you were sending them off the instrument to a network folder or whatever. Require comments on signatures. You can require a comment. In other words, if somebody reviews it or approves it, they have to write down why it's being approved or why not. And then you can see here, there's also the ability to comment on results here. And what that allows you to do is if there's a result and you want to go in and make a comment on it from the results database, you can go in and do that. That's turned off right now. Require reason for all changes and settings. You saw I had to do that. And then record all logins and logouts on the instrument. So this is all part of your data integrity, your 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, and your data management portion of the instrument. Timeouts is just what it says when the screen goes dark and those types of things. So we'll jump out of that. Next thing I want to talk about is the data management section of the instrument. And this is how you manage. Oops, I don't think I got that right. Okay. This is how you manage your data, or you export your data from the instrument. If you choose to export it manually, this is the screen you would use here. So what you can see, you can export as a CSV file or a PDF file. And then you can export any of these databases, users, results, events, or controls. And you can export it to a USB. There's USB ports on the back, or a network folder. Now, one of the things I want to talk about here, since we're talking about the different databases, is all of these databases have unlimited storage to them. So they will never fill up in the life of the instrument. It's a huge amount of memory in the instrument. And each one of these databases uses very little memory for each data point. So unlimited memory for results, events, users, and controls in the system. And you can then export these as a CSV or PDF through a USB or network folder. Now we also have a database backup. And what this allows you to do is not only back up all of those databases I just mentioned, but it also backs up the settings folder, the configuration file. And when you can do this, you can do it on a time schedule. In other words, once a day, week, or month. Or you can do a synchronous backup, which would happen in this particular case, it's set at 5 minutes up to, I think, 60 minutes, every 60 minutes. The difference between the two types of backups, so if we were doing it on a weekly basis, we would have 52 backup files in our network folder or on our USB, wherever we were storing that data. With the synchronous backup, you would have one continuous file. It continuously rewrites the file with the new data every time it does an update. So it's just a matter of how you prefer to have your backup files, whether you prefer to have an individual one once a day, week, or whatever, or if you want to have one synchronous, continuous backup file. The other thing I want to show here is import. So this is where you would import a backed up file. So if there was some type of catastrophic failure, you had your backup file. Here's where you would find that file and put it back on the instrument. And then the last thing is there's a single result PDF option here. What that allows you to do is have basically an electronic printout for each and every result. It would create one PDF file for each test result that was done. So that's the data management. Quickly go into networking and just talk about the different network capabilities. So as I said, you can back up the system or you can send your data to a network folder. So this is where you'd set up your local area network. You'd have your IT guys set up the folder and you can send out your data to the local area network. We have OPC UA. OPC UA is like a machine language, I like to call it, allows you to have bidirectional communication with the system. You can send sample IDs or test requests to the instrument, and then you can pick those up and perform them on the instrument from the instrument after sending them down. We also have a web server. What this allows you to do is just view all the data in the results database and from any location. Gives you that capability to just see what's going on. And then it can also connect to an LIS system if that's something you're interested in. So that's the network connection capabilities. We'll exit out of that. Let's see, is there anything else here? Just quickly talk about controls. I don't know what's in here. What the controls does is allows you to set up your controls and then basically trend your controls and see how things are going on the instrument. It allows you to look at them, see if there's any, we do have a control in here. So if we go to chart, let's see if, oops. So you can see here, I'm able to create a chart because I have controls in there. It shows my data points. And if you're seeing a trend of any way, you could track that trend and be able to look at that trend and make a determination and if there was anything that needed to be done to the instrument. So you can log all your controls in here easily, and then you can see them. You can run statistics on them. You can also create an action item. In the particular case of this instrument, the action would be to issue a warning. It's a single sample instrument. On the OsmoTECH Pro, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, you can actually stop the instrument from running a turntable of tests if you wanted to, if you set up an action item like this. So we'll exit out of there. Exit out of controls. Now we'll go back to the home screen, and you can see now that the colors on the home screen have changed. You can see it now has an orange bar across the top, which means that it ID and says ID is required. And the sample ID has turned to an orange color as well, which means that if I were to try and run another test, I would be required to log to put in a sample ID as well. But I'm not going to do that right now. What I want to do is talk a little bit about calibration first. So I'm going to go into the calibration menu. Calibration is required on these instruments once a year. And once a year, or if your controls are out of range. And what we say about that is we recommend running the 290 reference solution on a daily basis. If that's outside of plus or minus 4, we suggest you calibrate the instrument. Plus or minus 4 is 2 standard deviations. The instrument accuracy is plus or minus 2 at 1 standard deviation. We always recommend calibration at plus or minus 4 or 2 standard deviations. You can see the calibration setup here, walks you through how to run the calibration. In this particular case, in the low range, we use a 0, a 500, and a 1500. One great thing about a calibration process, if I hit this X button and cancel out of it right now, it has changed nothing in the instrument. It will not change the calibration curve until it says calibration complete. So I can easily step out of that calibration sequence. The instrument's still in the same condition, same settings as it had prior to me going in there. Nothing's changed. I can continue to run tests the way it was before. A couple other menus I want to talk about here yet. I want to go into the results database and just show you what the results database looks like. Again, unlimited storage of results in the system. You can see here that we have looks kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. Here you can select results and you can run statistics on those. I only have 2 there, but you can see we have a mean of 290.5, 0.7 standard deviation, 0.24% coefficient of variance. You could export that if you wanted to, or you can exit out. To clear that, there's a little button up here at the top that shows how many records are selected. And I just tap that and it clears those. You can see here we did have the electronic signature turned on, and you can see that these results here were approved by the service login at those particular times. So you can see how that would work. It's like I said, it's like an Excel spreadsheet. You can also search it by sample ID or user ID, however you want to do that. You can sort by the columns, so it makes it easy, very easy to work through. Okay, one last thing I would like to show on this particular instrument at this point is I'm going to go into the diagnostics menu. We're going to talk only about the events database. The events database is your audit trail. This is where everything is stored about the instrument, what all the settings, all the changes, who's been changed, what's been changed, and how it's been changed. So the one thing you can see here, again, unlimited data storage here. You can see the logins and logouts, logins to settings and controls. You can see the settings and network changes, logs in, and you can see down here at the bottom, change your user ID. You know what, I should have done this because I bet this would be easier to see. I just thought about that. Sorry about that. I hope you were able to see well enough. But you can see here, I changed user ID required from on to off, and you can see that change was made there as well. So this is your events database. This is stored on the instrument. It can never come off the instrument. There's no way to delete this file. There's no way to change it. There's no way to alter it. That's the same with the results database as well. The data always stays on the instrument. It cannot be deleted, altered, or changed. And this is very important when you're talking about your data integrity and data management. If you're looking at capabilities of, let's say, an environment where you're being audited and the FDA has a question about a test result, they'll always want to go back to the original source of the data to confirm that test result. The instrument is always your original source of data, and the results always stay on the instrument. Even if you're backing it up, even if you're exporting it, they never come off the instrument and they can never be deleted. So very important point there with regards to the data management of the system. So I'm going to exit out of this, go back to the home screen, and then let me think if there's anything I missed here. No, I do not believe so. Are there any questions about the OsmoTECH XT before I move over to the OsmoTECH Pro?
Yeah, Rick, so we have a few questions, and I think it's probably answers for both devices.
Okay.
Let's take the first one, which is if we get unusually high results on the instrument, for example, like a one-off, what could be driving that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time, Shweta. If we get a
random high value for a sample that generally would give us a low value on that device, what could, like an improper
okay, so
like an out of range value.
So say you got a 305 here on this 290. What could cause that? What could cause that type of a result? Well, there's a couple of things that can cause it. Probably the most common one would be is when you put the tip on the sampler here, you took a little bit, when you wiped it, you wicked out a little bit of extra sample there when you did that. That'll cause a high result. Another potential problem for a high result would be a bubble in the tip as well. So those are typically the two most common reasons you see a result that would be out of what you would consider your normal acceptable range. And then, we would just recommend to rerun the test again, assure that your volume on your sample is good and there's no bubbles in the sample, and your result should come back into range.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and the point being that really handling of the sample, pipetting, cleaning in between tests, avoiding air bubbles are critical when testing of the osmolality measurement on these devices. Another question we have, and this specifically for the XT, is when you were showing the calibration, it didn't look like it showed calibration for about 1500 milliosmol samples. So maybe you could just quickly show how you would do a calibration for the high range.
Yep. So yes, I was in the low range when I went into the calibration earlier. So I'm going to go into the high range now. If I can hit the button, then I'll go back into the menu and I'll go to calibration. And this time it should bring up the high-end calibration. So the high-end calibration is 1500, 3000, and 4000. Same thing here, walks you through doing 5 reps of each. Once all those reps are in there correctly, we then get a calibration complete and we're ready to go with the high range. Again, I can cancel out of this, no problem. And we're back.
Thank you, Rick. One more question, and I think this is referring to the first question we had answered earlier, which was regarding the sample volume. The question just following up to that is, you just mentioned that sample volume does matter, and you want to make sure you wipe off that excess, but does sample volume really affect osmolality?
So our sample volume for this test is 20 microliters. So to answer your question, yes, you want to be at 20 microliters. If you wick sample out of the tip, so if I were to take a tip here and put it on, and there's a good image of this in the user guide, but if the sample, you want it to be right flat at the top of that tip, and if it drops down below, then
a little is fine.
A little bit. I mean, it can be what I'll say is it can be concave, but it shouldn't be depressed below. So when we say sample volume doesn't affect osmolality, it doesn't affect it when you're going from 20 microliters in one instrument to 30 microliters in another, but you need to have accurate volume in your tip to get an accurate test result. So that's what we mean when volume doesn't affect. It affects it in a specific sample, but not between instruments.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's helpful. There are a few other questions. You want me to continue, or would you like to finish the Tech Pro and come back to it?
You want me to? Let me jump over to the Tech Pro, and then we'll come back to questions, because I don't have a lot to do on the Tech Pro, because it's very much the same as the OsmoTECH XT. So this is the OsmoTECH Pro. We'll quickly jump over to this unit here. As you can see, obviously a different instrument. Sorry, did somebody say something? Okay.
Nope.
Okay. OsmoTECH Pro here. So you can see this is a multi-sample instrument. We have our touchscreen display here, very much set up the same way as the OsmoTECH XT. We have our menu button. This is our load button. We have our sample counter here again. You can see the results here displayed in the carousel, as well as a list over here. You can see our last test result there. One nice thing about the instrument is it remembers which tests have already been run. So when I go and run a test now, it will automatically go over to position 4 and allow me to add to position 4, as opposed to having to remove the turntable or anything like that. It's set up exactly the same functions and benefits of the XT are in the OsmoTECH Pro. So all the data management, data integrity, 21 CFR compliance are all the same there. Your calibration on this one is at 0, 850, and 2000. Again, calibration only required once a year. It's a 0 to 2000 milliosmol range. So there's only one calibration range on this one, as opposed to the 2 on the XT. This is 30 microliters a sample. And so what I'm going to do here is just quickly run a test on this one. And let's see if I can zoom in just a little bit more. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my pipette. Excuse me, I got to grab my pipette tips here. So I'm going to get my 290 again. I'm going to grab a sample cup from our sample box here. This uses sample cups as opposed to the sample tips that we used over there. So this is the sample cup. If you can see that, that's our sample cup. The other thing that's required on this is you'll see here, right here, you see this white paper, that's the wiper ring. What that does is that cleans between each sample. So when I put the sample cup in between it, the sample probe will clean between the samples after every test. I'm going to pipette my 30 microliters into my sample cup. I'm going to hit my load button. So you see this one, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't have the user ID and sample ID required on the other instrument. It is required on this one. So I'm going to enter in my user ID. Hit enter. Now it's going to, the turntable is going to move around. It's going to ask me for my sample ID. I'm going to load my sample. I'm going to grab my box. I'm going to scan my barcode, and you can see it's loaded that in there. And I'm going to hit start. I'm only going to put one sample in so we don't have to wait too long for the testing to run. You can see now it says testing at the top here. Shows that position 4 is in testing. You can see in our display here, our test result will be there. Shows us our test tube, shows our sample ID. It'll obviously give us our date and time when we're done. Again, we have our status bar there. Just a couple of other things to point out. We have our, whether we're connected
Rick, do you want
to
to zoom in?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Shweta.
No worries.
Okay. All right. So again, we have our position here, our status bar, results. We have our LAN connection if we're connected here. Over here, we have two buttons. We have a plus button. The plus button will allow me to add samples during a test run. So if I had this loaded with, say, 10 samples, and I came up to it and I wanted to add more samples, I could hit the test button, or the plus button, I should say. It would finish the test it's running right now. It would then stop, would move to the next open position. So if I had 10 loaded, it would move to position 11, allow me to load more samples. Then I would hit the go button. It would then restart where it had left off and complete the testing. So it allows you kind of a continuous flow of testing. You can hear the knocking sound there. That means it's crystallized the sample as we talked about earlier. And we're now finishing our test, and we'll get our test results hopefully in a second here. Okay, there we go, 289. I was trying to get 290. I got 289, so well within range. This is plus or minus 3 on this particular instrument. So well within our tolerances there. I talked about the plus button. The X button is a cancel button. It would either cancel a test or you could cancel the entire turntable of tests you wanted to. All depends on whether you had multiple tests in there or not. You could then cancel all the tests or any one of those tests that you wanted to cancel out of there. So you can see here, again, just quickly, you can see the same type of menu setup here. We got our calibration, we have our results, our diagnostics, our settings. Our settings are pretty much set up, users, controls, restrictions, networking, data management, same setup as the OsmoTECH XT, same functionality there. And then we go back, we have our diagnostics, we have our events database again. And that should be it. So again, the difference between the two instruments, obviously multi-sample instrument here, 30 microliter sample, 0 to 2000 milliosmol range. Ability here to load up to 20 samples at one time, walk away and let them run. If we're talking about the OsmoTECH XT, we have a single sample instrument, 0 to 4000 milliosmol range, intelligent cooling system, which allows you to test some of the much more difficult samples that are out there today in the marketplace, high viscosity, high proteins, high sugars. It gives you the most accurate results on these types of samples and gives you the most accurate results across the widest range in the industry of 0 to 4000 milliosmols. So that's our demonstration of our two instruments for today. OsmoTECH Pro, multi-sample instrument, OsmoTECH XT, single sample, 0 to 4000 milliosmols, widest range in the industry. So now we can go back to our questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick. So we have a question, just to confirm, you can enter the sample ID by just scanning, right? And that could be, doesn't always have to be a barcode scanner?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So the built-in barcode scanner has the ability to do multiple different types of barcodes as well as QR codes. We have this information available for you if you want more information. And that will automatically pick up your sample name, and it can be an alphanumeric sample name.
Yes, and you also have the capability, you could plug in a keyboard if you wanted to, if you wanted to type in a sample ID or something like that. The USBs in the back, you can plug in a USB keyboard and you could do it that way as well.
Perfect. We have a few people ask this question. Can this device be connected to a workstation with a PC?
Yes, it can. We have specific instructions on how to connect it directly to a PC or a workstation. And if you're interested in that, let us know. And if you already have an instrument and you want to do that, if you don't, let us know anyways, and we'll help you get an instrument. But we can get you those instructions if you want to get that done.
Another question, can the sample temperature and/or ambient temperature affect results?
Sample temperature definitely can affect results. If the sample is too cold, it can most often cause what's known as a pre-freeze error. Because as the system starts the testing, it's looking for a change in temperature, and it's looking for a change of temperature over a specific time and specific rate. So if the sample is already too cold, say it just came out of the refrigerator or something like that, the instrument would think it's too cold already and it will give you a pre-freeze error. So whenever you're getting your samples prepared to run, take them out of if they're refrigerated, take them out of the refrigerator, get them as close to room temperature as possible before testing. Ambient temperature, it could affect it, but it has to be very, very extreme before it would affect the results. Basically, I'm saying, it'd have to be 40 degrees or 100 degrees in the room before it would start to affect. And I don't think you'd want to be in that room.
The other question is, can the sample tip sample directly from a syringe, or should the sample be transferred to another container for sampling? I think it depends on which device you want to use. If you have the OsmoTECH Pro, and if you're able to pipette in 30 microliters from the syringe directly into the sample cup, I'd say you're able to use that. If not, if it's the OsmoTECH XT, then you would need to be able to access that volume conveniently with that pipette tip.
Yeah, the tip is kind of wide, so I don't think you'd be able to get it out of a syringe, but yeah.
All right. Then we have a question, and this may be something I can help, is where the customer wants to know if we can have any models currently that can do 0 to 4,000 milliosmoles in a multi-sample format. So this is currently not an available product, but this is something as a product manager we're working on. We definitely want to engage with you and have a discussion on this, because there is definitely something that we hope to have available in the future. So if I definitely have your information, so we'll reach out to you. Another question, if I failed running buffer Osmo around 300, what could be the reason?
If they
failed and run an Osmo basically around 300 milliosmol, that they had a failure for a test, what could be the possible reason for that? So and I think we addressed that earlier, but just
I think we talked about a couple of the reasons: wicking out too much sample, getting a high result, bubbles, or something like that in there. We just talked about a temperature issue. Is it too cold, or is it even, depending on how you create the buffer, is it too hot? I mean, you can have a sample that's too hot as well. We don't usually run into that, but it's usually because the sample's too cold. But sample handling and introduction to the instrument is critical to these instruments. It's important, particularly with the XT, that you make sure you wipe the outside of the tip. You clean after every sample. That's the most important thing in maintaining these instruments. If you clean after every sample right away, when I say right away, less than a minute, I would say.
The instrument will beep.
It will start beeping, so it will let you know. So as long as you do that, you're never going to have any issues. But those could be some of the problems that you could have as well if somebody didn't clean it properly before after the last test.
Yeah. Rick, maybe you could take a few minutes to talk about the difference between the Tech Pro and the HT.
The Tech Pro and the HT. Oh, okay,
Yep.
sure. So the OsmoTECH Pro over here is a 20-position carousel, and it's 0 to 2,000 milliosmoles, as you can see. And after, obviously, 20 samples, you have to remove the carousel, empty out all the samples, and then start all over again. The OsmoTECH HT is a 96-well plate-based osmometer. So you're using a 96-well microtiter plate as your sample as your turntable, we'll call it, for lack of a better word. And you could fill that with your samples. You load that into the instrument, and then it will run those tests out of that 96-well plate for you. So if you were running one sample out of each well, it would be about 3 hours worth of testing for you for 96 wells. You can run up to 3 replicates out of each well. And so you could do replicates out of each well. So you could do, if you're doing replicates out of 96 wells, what is that? 96 times 3. I'm not multiplying very quickly right now. 18, 27, 287 tests. I think I got that right.
Yeah.
Anyways, you could do 287 tests out of one 96 well plate. The instrument also holds 1,000 tests, is set up to run 1,000 tests without requiring any other new consumables, where, like I said here, after every 20 samples, you got to basically replace your consumables.
So yeah, so basically 96 well plate format, ability to run 1,000 tests without needing any kind of maintenance and changes and intervention, right, Rick? Yep. And the ability to easily do duplicate testing from a single well, which currently you would need to pipe it into different tubes. But yeah, from a data integrity compliance perspective, it would be similar to the Tech Pro.
Exactly. Identical, yep.
Perfect. All right, let me get to another question here, which is, sorry. Can you import a list of sample IDs from an Excel file instead of manually entering it with the touchscreen?
No, you cannot on these two instruments here. We just talked about the OsmoTECH HT. The OsmoTECH HT actually does have that capability to download from Excel or from some other type of file what we call a template, which would have all your sample IDs and everything loaded into it. But these two instruments here, no, you cannot do that. You would have to either enter it manually with the barcode scanner or keyboard, or manually on the keypad, or with OPC UA on the XT, you could send a sample ID down to the instrument that needed to be tested.
And on the Tech Pro as well, you could use OPC UA and have the whole queue.
On the Tech Pro, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
all the queue of samples. And no, that's all right. That's why we hear you. Another question is daily or weekly standardization recommended given that it's calibrated 1 year? So I think here we want to define what standardization. We call it verification. So it's basically verification of the calibration of the device. So you would calibrate the instrument once a year, and then daily prior to use, you would verify it with the control. And that's the one Rick was showing you earlier with that 290 standard. And you would obviously also want to add in a verification prior to running your samples as best practice with a control that's closer to your sample. So if your sample is, let's say, 400 something, you could definitely use a 300 or 400 milliosmol standard and get that closer to your sample as a verification of that calibration. And if you want to do a post-sample run verification at the end, that's also possible with any of the controls that we have. But we would recommend that as doing it instead of doing frequent calibrations on the device. Okay, with minimal sample handling for the OsmoTECH Pro, does it guarantee better accuracy and precision than the XT?
No, I'm not going to say better. They're basically equivalent, is what I would say. The sample volume is 30 microliters, 20 microliters. This is a single sample unit. The actual specifications on the OsmoTECH Pro are slightly wider than the XT, but that's because it is a multi-sample instrument and you're loading up to 20 samples at one time, and you're allowing them to sit in there for 40 minutes basically. But you're talking about 1 milliosmol, which is insignificant, basically. This is plus or minus 2. The XT is plus or minus 2. This is plus or minus 3. Over a 20-position turntable, you're going to see the same basic accuracy between the XT on one sample and the Tech Pro on 20 samples there.
Another question is, has the system been tested with any of the popular LIMS and data repository systems? Example, Waters. Waters solution. Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Our osmometers are tested and currently being used by customers connected to various different LIMS, MES, SCADA solutions, whether it be LabVantage, Labware, Waters. I think Metler has a version. There's too many to name out there.
Yeah.
And we definitely are compatible with that. In fact, we don't need a driver to connect, and that's the advantage of having OPC UA used as a method of connecting and sharing data between the instrument and your platform. Okay. Another question that came in is, if I'm scrolling down, I apologize. In what could cause non-freezing errors within replicates?
Non-freezing errors within so the sample did not freeze. Sample did not freeze within replicates. So first I have to ask the question, what is the expected value of that? Because that could be if we're up at the high end of a range, or we're near the cutoff point on the XT, for instance, between the high and the low range, it could give you an error like that. But I'd really have to get more information about the sample and the value we're trying to get as to why, and then have to evaluate why we would get it between replicates, why we would get a did not freeze error.
Yeah, and sometimes if it's a multi-sampler, just care and cleaning, depending on the sample type, can also result in that. So
yeah,
it would be good to get more information there. All right. I think that's answered all the questions. We do have some interest in getting an instrument that can do multi-sample above 2000. Again, I will reach out to you separately. But if you do have samples above 2000 currently, the OsmoTECH XT is your best solution out there. Yep. For testing those samples. I think that's all the questions. I don't believe I've missed anything else. So with that, thank you, Rick, and thank you all for taking the time for joining this session. I hope you were able to learn a little something new about the OsmoTECH XT and the OsmoTECH Pro osmometers. And we will have another virtual demo for the OsmoTECH XT instrument, the newest to the family. And for those of you, if with more additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And this recording will be available to share with your fellow colleagues on our website if they couldn't make it. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a good day.